This is a terrifying story I encountered while I was in university. At the time, I was studying in the Shonan area of Kanagawa Prefecture. I was living in a house in Kaigasaki that belonged to my aunt. Since my aunt was usually overseas, I could stay there alone without anyone bothering me, and it saved me a lot of rent money. Although it was a bit far from campus, I thought it was worth it. Near my aunt's house there was a railroad crossing where many people went to end their lives. The reasons were unclear, and most left no suicide note. Right beside the crossing stood an old shrine. During the day, the crossing was busy with cars and pedestrians coming and going. But late at night, when everything grew quiet, the place became eerily silent, with only the sound of insects echoing around. Back when I was still a student, I rode my bicycle to school every day and passed through that crossing. To me, it looked completely ordinary. I had no idea it had any rumors attached to it until one day after class, when I stopped at a nearby butcher shop to buy a fried pork cutlet. I overheard some elderly locals chatting and learned that for a very long time, many young people had died at that crossing every year. The locals believed a monster was at work, so they had built the shrine beside it to pray for safety. After the shrine was built, the number of accidents decreased, but every year at least one person still met with an accident there. That was the first time I heard about its dark history. Yet I, who had been living a smooth and uneventful life, never dreamed that I would encounter something so horrifying myself. One night I finished my part-minus-time job quite late. The road was empty. I was about to cross the railroad crossing alone when a train approached. The crossing alarm began to sound, and the barriers slowly lowered from above. I stood there alone, staring blankly. The warning sound grew louder and louder. Suddenly my vision blurred, and the scene in front of me twisted and distorted. A white mist appeared on the tracks, but there was something unnatural about it. In the next instant, I realized I was no longer waiting outside the crossing. I was standing right on the tracks, enveloped in the mist. Strangely, I felt no fear or terror. Instead, a euphoric, dreamlike pleasure washed over me. I can't really describe it. I just felt incredibly happy and comfortable. In my ears I heard the beautiful humming of a woman's and a man's voices singing together. While I was lost in that enchanting comfort, I noticed a Komuso monk standing not far ahead. He was at least 2 meters tall, wearing an enormous mask on his head and holding a shakuhachi, the traditional Japanese bamboo flute. On either side of him sat 2 foxes. Then the man issued a warning in a stern-voiced child, "Do not be deceived." Immediately the 2 foxes beside him charged straight at me. The man then spoke again in an extremely deep, low-tone child, "Come here." In that moment, I felt as if I were being pulled toward him. Everything around me rushed past, and a wave of clarity swept over me. I heard the man's voice once more next time, "You'll have to handle it yourselves." Then, like waking from a dream, I snapped back to reality. I opened my eyes and found myself drenched in sweat, kneeling on the ground beside the shrine on the other side of the crossing. I remembered that I had clearly been waiting for the train to pass. Just then, the train behind me roared past at high speed. The alarm stopped, and the barriers slowly rose. Everything fell silent again. The whole experience felt utterly unreal. On the way home I kept wondering whether the many young souls who had died there were trying to drag someone of similar age into their world of the dead. Later, I told the story to my 3 best friends at school. They all laughed at me. One of the bolder ones even joked, "Someday I'll go check it out myself and find the answers for you." After that, I never went near the crossing again. Not long afterward, the friend who had said he would investigate suddenly stopped coming to class. He vanished completely. No one could reach him. Then one early morning he was found dead at that same railroad crossing, apparently having committed suicide. But the other 2 friends and I refused to believe it was suicide. He had always been cheerful and lively. Everything in his life was going well. He had no reason to kill himself. The only thing I could think of was that he really had gone there to explore on his own and ended up getting entangled by something terrible that dragged him away. This is a weird urban legend, The story goes like this: a woman named Misa was driving on a deserted road at night when she noticed she was almost out of gas. She decided to refuel, but she was in a remote area. Luckily, she spotted a gas station that was still open. She pulled in, parked the car, but the attendant didn't come out. So she honked the horn. Then she saw a gaunt, hollow-cheeked male attendant who looked terrifyingly thin walk out from inside. The attendant stared coldly into her car with narrowed eyes while pumping the gas, constantly looking her up and down as if he had something in mind. Tha felt disgusted and wanted to finish quickly and leave, so she handed her credit card to the attendant. The male attendant said, "Miss, this card of yours is a fake, isn't it? It can't be used." Misa protested. "How is that possible? Of course it's a legitimate card, not a fake one." But the male attendant wouldn't let her go and refused to listen to her explanation. "This is a counterfeit card. Come with me over here." With that, the male attendant forcibly dragged her out of the car, gripping her arm tightly, and pulled the woman toward the office. Shah thought to herself, "This is bad. I'm done for." She had no idea what this man wanted to do to her, out here in the middle of nowhere. No matter how hard she screamed, it would be useless, and there was nowhere to run. Just like that, she was taken by the male attendant to the office. The moment they entered the office, the male attendant quickly locked the door, then thrust his terrifying face close to hers. Kamame Shah thought it was all over. Just as she was about to give up and let him do whatever he wanted, the male attendant suddenly said something unbelievable. He collapsed onto the floor and told her, "Miss, call the police right now." She couldn't process what she was hearing and replied, "What?" The male attendant crouched by the window, peering outside, then spoke to her in a trembling voice. "Just now, I saw it. Under the back seat of your car, there was a man hiding. His eyes were bloodshot, and he was holding a kitchen knife. To keep you safe. That's why I had to make up an excuse and drag you over here by force." Later, when the police arrived after the report, they found a kitchen knife under the back seat, but the man had already vanished without a trace. A few years ago, my company arranged for me to attend a training camp to get my medium truck license. This story happened during that overnight training, at the lodging where we stayed. It was so terrifying that even now, just thinking back on it makes me shiver. Here's what happened. After graduating from high school, I didn't think I was cut out for studying, so unlike everyone else, I didn't take the university entrance exams. Instead, I went straight into the workforce. I got a job at a large transportation company in the prefecture. After working there for a little over 2 years, the company ordered me to attend a training camp in the neighboring prefecture to obtain my medium truck license. The schedule was 8 days and 7 nights. It felt almost like a trip, and everything was paid for by the company. To be honest, I felt really lucky to be working at a place like this. I was genuinely happy from the bottom of my heart. On the morning of departure, after saying goodbye to my supervisor, I switched between trains and buses on my way to the training site. I arrived in the afternoon. The place was much nicer than I had imagined. Rather than a plain dormitory, it had the atmosphere of a small inn, with excellent facilities. I quickly completed the checklists and procedures, dropped off my luggage, and immediately started the specialized training. In the evening we did hands-on driving practice. The excitement from the real vehicle training hadn't even faded before the first day came to an end. After dinner and a bath, I was shown to my room. It was a small single room about the size of 4 tatami mats. In the center was a bed. Deepest on the left was a closet with folding doors, and on the right stood a desk and chair. Although the room was a bit small, it was very clean. I felt somewhat relieved knowing I could spend the training period in such a comfortable environment. The moment I entered the room, I flopped straight onto the bed. Maybe I was more tired than I realized, because that night I fell asleep very early. I don't know how long I had been sleeping when I suddenly woke up. The light that had been on was now off, and the room was pitch black. I lifted my head and looked around. A faint light was leaking through the gap in the closet doors. I wondered, is there a light inside the closet too? As I stared blankly at the glow, I suddenly saw a shadow flicker inside. What was that? Could it be a mouse or something? If so, that would be disgusting. Because it bothered me, I got out of bed and opened the folding doors to check inside. There was nothing unusual, and no sign of any mouse. Was it just my imagination? Just as I was about to close the door, I noticed a piece of paper minus-like object inside. The instant I picked it up, my eyes flew open. I was back on the bed in my brightly lit room, suddenly awake. What? It was just a dream? But the dream had felt incredibly real. While I was thinking that, I realized my right hand was tightly gripping something. I raised it in front of my face. There, in my palm, was the exact piece of paper I had picked up in the dream. I was startled. What the hell is this? Without even checking what kind of paper it was, I crumpled it into a ball and tossed it into the trash can beside the bed. Then I turned off the light and went back to sleep. The next morning, I had completely forgotten about the previous night's events. I spent the whole day studying. The practical driving lessons were fun, but the classroom theory sessions were a constant battle against drowsiness. That night, I chatted with friends on my phone and, without realizing it, fell asleep with the light still on. Then something unbelievable happened. I had the exact same dream as the night before, and when I woke up, just like before, I was holding a piece of paper in my right hand. Not again. It felt gross. Because I was exhausted from training, I couldn't be bothered to examine what the paper actually was. I simply crumpled it up and threw it toward the trash can. On the morning of the third day, I woke up only 10 minutes before breakfast ended. I rushed to the cafeteria, ate quickly, and immediately prepared for the day's lessons. That night, I had the same dream again. Once more, I crumpled the paper and tossed it into the trash. This continued until the evening of the fourth day, after training had ended. As I lay on the bed, I finally grew curious. What exactly were these pieces of paper I had been crumpling and throwing away every night? But when I looked inside the trash can, it was empty. It seemed the cleaning staff came into the rooms every day and cleared everything out. There was nothing I could do, so I gave up and went to sleep. Sure enough, the dream appeared again, along with the piece of paper in my right hand. This time, I looked at it carefully. I couldn't make out anything written on it. It was just an old piece of VDA paper, the kind of Japanese Shinto talisman usually pasted on doors or pillars for protection. At the time, because of exhaustion and sleepiness, left me unable to calmly make a judgment, so I still crumpled that piece of paper into a ball and threw it into the trash. On the fifth night, I calmed down and thought it over. Every night I had the same dream, then woke up clutching a piece of paper that looked like a Shinto talisman. It felt strangely eerie. I suspected there must be some secret hidden in the closet. I moved everything stuffed inside onto the bed and checked the shelves, the floor, and the walls, but found nothing unusual. Even so, I still wondered if there might be traces of torn talisman somewhere else. So I searched the entire room thoroughly, including under the bed and behind the desk, but found no similar marks at all. Yet on the fifth and sixth nights, I had the same dream again. When I woke, my right hand was once more tightly gripping the identical piece of paper. What had begun as mere nausea gradually turned into real fear. I am not a sleepwalker, and more importantly, I had no idea where these talisman papers were coming from. Then came the final night, when something happened that still terrifies me to this day. Exhausted from days of fatigue and gripped by overwhelming fear, I had grown weary of it all. I thought that if I simply stayed awake, I wouldn't dream. After all, morning training would be over by tomorrow, so pulling one all-minus-nighter should be fine. That night, I decided to stay up and see exactly what was happening after dark. I lay on the bed, killing time on my phone. Suddenly, I heard a noise. I froze and listened carefully, trying to locate the source. It seemed to be coming from inside the closet. I got up, walked over, and pressed my ear against it. The sound was like fingernails scratching at the folding doors from the inside. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Fear surged through me, but since I had already forced myself to stay awake, I was determined to find out what it was. Gathering my courage, I opened the closet. There was nothing there. Strange, I had definitely heard it. Then I noticed the door itself seemed to still be making faint sounds. So I stepped inside the closet and closed the folding door behind me to check. It was very dim inside. The light coming through the gaps created a backlit glare, and my eyes took a moment to adjust. When they did, what met my gaze was a scene of unimaginable horror. On the inner side of the unfolded folding door, from top to bottom, was an entire surface covered in traces of tail mushrooms that had once been pasted there. Goose and stee erupted all over my body. I scanned downward from the very top of the door. When my eyes reached the floor, I saw something even more unbelievable. Right at my feet sat a woman dressed in white. She was intently using her long fingernails to scratch and peel at the very last talisman stuck at the bottom of the folding door, trying to tear it off. At first glance, she radiated a wretched, overwhelming resentment. The sheer shock of that moment nearly stopped my breath. My foot was right beside the talisman. Perhaps disturbed by it, the woman slowly raised her gaze along my leg until she reached my face. Through her long, dry, disheveled hair, her bloodshot eyes stared straight into mine. I screamed and bolted out of the closet. In those few terrifying seconds, the thought of having been trapped alone with her in that narrow space filled me with such dread that I could not bear to stay in the room any longer. I scrambled out in a panic and collapsed onto the sofa in the hallway, hugging my knees and shaking uncontrollably. The next morning, I woke up on that hallway sofa when a door staff member shook me awake. He asked why I was sleeping there. I started to explain that something was wrong with my room, but before I could finish, he immediately responded, You wouldn't happen to be in room 104, would you? I answered yes. The staff member nodded and said matter-of-factly, as expected. But today is the last day, right? It's okay now. Don't be afraid. With that, he left. Afterward, I returned to my room, still trembling with fear. Even though it was broad daylight, I was scared to death. In a panic, I pulled all my belongings out of the closet. Once I finished the final training session, I left that place as quickly as I could. Although a long time has passed since this incident, I still find myself thinking about it to this day. If I had stayed for one more day, what would have happened once that very last talisman was torn off? I wonder how the person who used that room after me is doing now. To this day, I still can't figure out what that thing on the tracks really was. I only know that if I hadn't left when I did, if I had stayed even one more day, what would have happened once that very last talisman was torn off? I never went back to that guest house again. Even now, whenever I pass by a railroad crossing at night, I can't help but glance toward the tracks. In the dim light, I sometimes think I see a faint white figure standing there, motionless, staring straight at me with empty eyes. But when I look again, there's nothing. Just the cold rails stretching into the darkness, and the distant sound of a train whistle that never quite arrives. If you ever find yourself staying near an old railway line, and the innkeeper casually mentions that the last guest left something important behind, maybe think twice before you ask what it was, and whatever you do, don't stay in the room at the very end of the corridor, especially not if you hear soft footsteps approaching your door after midnight, or if the air suddenly grows so cold it feels like winter has slipped inside, because some passengers never really get off the train. For the next person to board,